Let's get this show on the road. We shall see how this shapes up. While people show up as they are wont to do, I will juggle my windows as I am wont to do. I have a plan for what we're doing today. Boop, there we have our window, and oh, hello. What's that? That doesn't look right. So if we unplug this and plug it in again, maybe it'll be happier. Or not. Okay, well, this should be interesting. I got some kind of issue going on with this. It's not working right. Unplug you. Plug you in one more time and see whether it's any better. Not so much. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. Let's see whether maybe doing something on the screen changes it. I'll launch Xcode and see if it still looks like a complete horror show. And we're going to up, and it got better. Cool. I have no idea what that was. And it got worse again. Wow, okay. Well, we're going to go on a journey of adventure here as to how impossible my screen looks, because that makes no sense at all. For now, however, we're going to trundle through this however we may. Because we have a goal. And here, let me do a couple of other things. Maybe running macro would help. Run coding picture in picture. I said run code. Oh, no, it's there. Okay, so I do have my picture in picture, but when I switch to the laptop, it goes crazy. Now I'm going to need to do work anyway, whether or not this is working. Although it is a very hot day, so I'm not sure that the lighting is going to be welcome. I also note that something went wrong with the camera. Maybe that has something to do with it. So bear with me for a second. I'm going to put the mic over here. Like anytime the camera stuff goes weird on me, it might be because the ATEM Mini is freaking out. And currently the ATEM Mini is doing a thing that corresponds to not being able to communicate with the camera. The camera is turning on properly, but the ATEM should be able to send the camera a message saying you're being used right now, therefore turn your little in-use light on. That's what we've got here. So in trying to make all of this actually work with my bulky Blackmagic ATEM, what we're going to do is probably fiddle with let me dial back the preamp volume a little bit while I'm at it. And relaunch the ATEM software control. I'm talking my way through this because if you ever do live streaming, you might end up having to do the same thing. And in case I need to read anything, let's put on the glasses. Nice that I have audio anyway. We could do a kind of podcast, or we could do a coding stream where you can never see the screen. That'd be less than great, but a thing. And ATEM software control file, restore, go to this saved up file, hit restore, and it'll switch away to AUX because that's how I saved it. That's how it's supposed to look, and the laptop input is still broken. So I don't know what to tell you. I wonder whether I can make it. It's doing that starting with a particular pixel on the screen, and I have no idea why. Let's go and look at that some more. So this is what the screen looks like, but if I launch a music file that covers up the spot on the screen that's going wrong, wow. We have a world of crazy going on here. Do I need to replace this cable? Stranger things have happened, I suppose. I know I keep needing to uncoil and recoil the cable when installing it, so it's possible that the bending and unbending of it did something. It sure is acting as though there's a spot on the screen where whatever hits that spot, oh, and yeah, get a load of this craziness. The poor little ATEM is absolutely freaking out trying to work with this. It's either the ATEM is freaking out, or here, let's test something else. My AUX is this cable, which is not currently doing anything. If I unplug it, unplug the laptop, and then plug it into here. Aha! We got the same craziness going on, where I move this around and it's just flipping out. This is kind of like my live streams. That suggests that my cable, don't mind me, just plugging things in. Oh. And now I have a black screen. What happens if I unplug that and try plugging it in once more? Huh. Alrighty, let's watch and see how badly this flips out. Oh yeah. Okay, so check it out. I can hit play and you can hear what I'm doing on this. And yeah, don't mind the weirdness. I dare say I can get rid of ATEM software control at this point. what you can see is that I can work on this, and especially if I boost the volume a little bit, you can hear what I'm doing, but you're not going to be able to see the video, because even if I do picture-in-picture, and that's real disconcerting because that should not be happening at all. Picture-in-picture lives inside the ATEM. So what's happening here, hang on. We've got a bit of a meltdown going on over here. Like, I can do a picture-in-picture. I can launch the ATEM again and redo the picture-in-picture because I have a macro for that. So that redefines what the picture-in-picture looks like. But now if I switch over to the Sleepy Circuits Hypno and hit the picture-in-picture, it's not entirely happy. It's not doing great. And of course, if I go over to the laptop, it's just straight up freaking out. And the laptop input was also freaking out in another input, suggesting that it's this cable. So I'm going to unplug that now, which means that my laptop is rebooting itself. We're going to go back over to Hypno. See, this is Hypno. And if I hit the picture-in-picture, okay. Evidence suggests that my ATEM is breaking. This is not awesome. This has been a useful thing for me, although it's not absolutely indispensable. Like some of my stuff I can do in OBS. But this looks suspiciously like the ATEM has died. I'm using... I don't need to have that going. Like what you're seeing is this camera, and it's still fine with this camera, but as soon as I turn on anything on channels 3 or 4, 3 being Hypno, and this is working okay by itself, and it might be thermal, this might be heat oriented, and then engage something that requires it to do some thinking. I turn on picture-in-picture and it's taking forever to kick in. Picture-in-picture is supposed to be this screen. And now it's not doing that at all. And of course the laptop input isn't working either. Okay, well, and the trippy stuff, that is just, oh, and if I change it, then the picture-in-picture showed up. It was frozen, and then it was not. So hang on a second. My live streams usually show this laptop input. It's a bit of a downer not to have that, so bear with me while I'm scampering about, figuring out what I can do to make this all work. I'm going to take my mic off for a sec. So the whole deal with the ATEM was that I've been having to run it into this other converter just to get stuff into the computer. Now if I take this cable away from here, and I got a little bit of room to stretch it, I may very well be able to go to an input that is laptop only, and then I'll just be kind of podcast style talking over the mic. So we're going dark right now. And let's see if we got an HDMI input. And replug it. See, it's now frozen because it's supposed to be getting a video input. Yeah, that ain't working. You know, I'd like to be working on a plugin when video setups go bad. So let's unplug that again. And plug this back in again. All right, actually there was another possibility. All right, and that came alive again. Okay, well this is a bit of a bummer. I can't show you my screen. The thing that I used to show the screen is super duper broken, and or this little deal is super broken. As you can see, I can plug these things in, and I could plug in the screen, but when I've got two things happening on the ATEM Mini, the Blackmagic ATEM Mini, it's freaking out. Like, these are perfectly legitimate inputs, and it appears that the inputs are working fine. But as soon as I put on picture-in-picture, it is not happy. And I just tried to run the laptop with its little cable and stuff into the converter that I use for simply and yeah, how this looks is oh, it's not entirely happy with this either, is it? This is the ATEM Mini taking in video. The video is coming out of Sleepy Circuits Hypno, and it's tending to freeze. It is tending to crash. Like, now it's running, but it's flickering. And I can do stuff with it where it's hiccuping and basically crashing. Now, if the pixels are dimmer like this, it seems to be okay. And in fact, I can even put my picture-in-picture over it, but as soon as the pixels are more bright, it's dying. And then if I make them be real dim again, it's not. So this makes me wonder whether I can make this whole thing work by running the laptop in as I was before. Here, let's go back to the experimenting, because that's real interesting. the fact that I can feed it this stuff and it's not flipping out. I'm going to go back over here. This was supposed to be working on a plugin, as you know. We're going to plug this into here. Let's actually unplug everything we're not using, that being the sleepy circuits, and also the AUX camera. And that laptop's going to be dark until I plug it in, at which point it'll kind of reset itself. So can I change the brightness of this screen in such a way that it'll be sending the brightness over HDMI? Laptop looks like this, but if I this is me trying to change the screen brightness. Nothing's happening. Oh, no, wait. I think that's something else. I think that's like the... Oh, yeah. No, that's the brightness of my keyboard. Let me see whether I can change the screen brightness. No, I can make the screen go black, but it's not changing the video output. So... System preferences. Maybe I can tell it to be a different color? Aha, interesting. Display profile BD HDMI. Let's calibrate this. Oh man, we're freaking out super hardcore now. And I can't see any changes to what this is. Let's step through that. How about gamma, maybe? Oh, now we're frozen on another visual. That's interesting. We're going to save this with some kind of weird name because it super ain't working. D50. Oh, well, we got back to something visual. We're going to call this calibration setting Crazy Town and see whether anything works. Okay, I can go to this HDMI setting here, but if I go to Crazy Town, it blows up. That's no good. This is the kind of thing. See, the different things that I'm choosing are causing different freakouts. The idea here is to get a color calibration where it's sending visual information through this cable into the ATEM Mini, where the ATEM Mini is not flipping out and falling over and dying. Because I still have it where this camera is still mostly working, I guess. It's possible if I boosted the brightness of the camera, it too would start freaking out. But, oh, has idea. Here's another idea. Let's go back to the profile for this. And let's go into ATEM software control, because that has some controls over, dude, all of the plugins are free, don't even worry about it. ATEM software control has this camera settings. Camera 4 is on air. And it should be able to talk to the controller. Unfortunately, there's a problem. Let's reboot it. Black. And start over. See, some of the pixels are causing it to freak out. I'm trying to figure out whether there are some settings on the ATEM that will make it behave, because it always used to behave, but all of a sudden it doesn't. Like, I've got this set, so now I have color correction. It is not responding to the color correction, and that's a problem. I can't adjust any of these things. I can change these settings. Interesting. See what's happening? If I do a fade to black in the ATEM system, what it's going to do is fade out the pixels that are coming off of the laptop. And here, I can even throw on this. If I do a fade to black, some of it's normal. And then as soon as it goes to full brightness, it's freaking out again. The ATEM Mini is freaking out when the pixels are too bright, for no good reason, because it should be able to handle that, but today it's not. I can go to black. I'm trying to find out whether I can force it to, and back to our picture-in-picture. I have this controller here in ATEM software control. And as you can see, if I fade it to black, it starts out okay, and it's normal, and then it goes to a place where it's freaking out and it's too bright. So what I need to do, I think, is a scene change. Where I'm using this controller. And let's put on our picture-in-picture, if it'll let us. It might not. I might be able to get this pile of junk to actually show you the screen that I'm coding on. There's a picture-in-picture. And there's a picture-in-picture. So we can only do picture-in-picture on one camera at a time. Like this. And then if I've got it set so that the other thing it's moving to is camera 3, which is not plugged in, that's a black screen. So if we bring this up, there comes a point on the fade, whereas you can see I'm fading from a black screen to this other situation, which has the camera and it has the laptop that I've been using this entire time. And as it gets brighter, we get to a spot where it goes wrong. And all the little steps beyond that are the ATEM freaking out to this final point where it is showing the visuals, but it's freaked out. So we'll do the fade up to, that's around where it is. That looks like that's around where the on-air button is. And hi folks, we're back with the chat window. And half an hour into the stream, we're going to settle for this. So if you're wondering why it's a little bit darker today, it's because my ATEM is broken. Yay. On the other hand, it's cheaper than the actual cameras, and the cameras don't seem to be broken, so that's cool. We'll see. And I reckon maybe, well, let's find out. If I quit it, does it die? The ATEM software control, I mean. Nope. So that's interesting. Yeah, it would be the video card inside the Blackmagic Design ATEM Mini, which is a sort of budget switcher. And maybe that's what we're seeing, is the budget switcher nature of this. Because it's sitting on top of my... it is sitting on top of my Lavry converter, and it's a stupid hot day. It's such a hot day that it's more than 80 degrees in here, and it claims to be 118 degrees outside, which is not actually true. So, tell you what, I'm curious as to whether maybe I can figure out something to either help this or at least stop it from breaking even worse. Like propping it up somehow, maybe? As here's the thing. I definitely feel as if I can identify the problem here. I've got this Blackmagic video switcher hanging around here, and it's sitting on top of a DAC that's super hot. Like, it feels extremely hot to the touch, and it's already hot in here, and the DAC's probably fine. It seems to be surviving just fine, but this converter is not. I mean, the video thing is not. And I need to be able to reach the buttons on the converter to make it work. But, here, quick fix. Can I balance? No, I can't. Okay, bear with me, folks. This is very much into that creative space of fixing stuff. Before I do anything else, I totally need to lift this thing off of the thing. Here's a possibility. A tripod. I'll get to your questions, guys. I've rarely had this much trouble with the gear on a video stream. This is really quite over the top. The sound you're hearing is me trying to fit stuff into other stuff. So right now what I've got is the video switcher tilted up because I wedged a tripod under it. And it's no longer flush with the converter. The converter is incredibly hot. And it's also incredibly hot in here, and I'm sure that's only going to get worse as the summer goes on. I wish this was debugging. This is more like video system debugging. And I'm not even sure if I would call it bugging. If it is the small, constrained video switcher, which is a lot of heavy CPU, you know, it's a lot of heavy thought. You're not supposed to set that on a space heater. I bet if you asked them, can I set my ATEM Mini on top of a space heater? Can I set it on top of an oven burner and turn the burner on and have it work? They'd be like, no. So I see the problem right away. And the funny thing is, I think that the heat is a combination of the DAC and this video switcher. Like, the DAC is not as hot as it was. I think it's the video switcher that was heating up the Lavery, which is good because the video switcher is a lot cheaper. So if something was to break, I hope it's the video switcher. Oh God, I'm feeling terrible. Well, hey, I'm not in Canada. Let me scroll back the scroll and see what we've got. Yeah, plugins for sale. No, they're all free. Go and download them. It'll say that you're downloading the demo. Go and click on the thing. It'll get the real plugin. Those that haven't been ported yet. Patreon, yes, that's how you pay me. This is not that bad of a heat wave for Vermont, but it's still more than a bit annoying. And I can see that I need to reposition all of my stuff. In particular, this video switcher needs to both have better air circulation and not be sitting directly on top of a DAC. Although, yeah, I need to design something for this because it's definitely the black magic that's heating up like a bomb. The Lavery isn't nearly so bad, and it's bearing up pretty well under all of this. But the black magic is heating up lots, and it can't handle the 80 degrees in here. So if it gets even hotter, it's going to be really struggling. I probably need to figure out some way of doing a convection cooling that actually involves like little fabricated ducts or something, where that, or just build in a little fan, because it doesn't have a little fan and it kind of needs one. You feel the underside of this switcher and the thing's freaking melting. Now it does have me wondering whether if I do the cooling, it'll start behaving itself again, because that's clearly what was wrong with it. The electronics overheated, and that's what it did. I might even be able to brighten up the screen, but I'm not going to risk it. Let's actually code a plugin going forward. And it's good of it to be able to handle one input that doesn't have pixels that are too bright without dying. That's handy. But yeah, clearly work needs to be done here. I might be able to stand it up on its... I fiddle with all the cables, because all the cables going into the back of it are these heavy HDMI cables, and they're cumbersome and they don't move around very easily. So let's keep scrolling. Yeah, the screen stuff is my video switcher overheating. That's what that turned out to be. You get all the plugins all at once by downloading one of the downloads. The profiles turned out not to be a relevant thing. What that was about was going to displays and going to color, and it was a different kind of gamut. And this particular way of doing it, I'm able to do color sync on this. Like, the weird part about this is that if I go through this process, I can calibrate it for, and I do not think that this is listening to, like that's the screen, that's not the HDMI output. But the way this stuff works, I am seeing entirely what is on the HDMI and it's being recalibrated. Like what we're seeing, you're supposed to match the brightness of that apple, and it's not changing anything that's showing on the screen. It's only changing what's showing on the mini DisplayPort output. And the trouble we have here is that's being rescaled in the video switcher. So I'm getting nonsense results, like this is not actually going to be the correct setting for that, nor the color shading. I can do this, and then the color shading changes around radically, but on the laptop screen it's normal. So I can set that stuff to be basically ordinary. But the thing about it is, in order to make it look right on the thing I'm seeing in the stream, that's not a sane output. It should be somewhere closer to the middle, but since the video processing, it's being done by these lines of black versus gray and so on and so forth. So it makes no sense. This one actually is making slightly better sense. But that's because that's a sane output value. And the dark ones are not making any sense at all. In fact, that actually just freaked it out. We'll have to avoid that. And the video died. Cool. So bear with me, I can get the video to wake up by doing this, but I'm going to have to go back to another one of the... Here's native waypoint. And yeah, we're still overheating, we're still throwing stuff at it that causes it to become upset. So I'm going to have to go back to another one of the settings. We'll call that one Crazy Town again, because it is not right. And if I go back to one of the earlier profiles, it's behaving itself again. So that was what the gamma stuff was. It was trying to send output through the HDMI port that the overheating video switcher was able to handle. And turns out that's not a thing. I'm not making video effect plugins, at least not yet. If I had a way of starting to fool with them, I'd be off and running, but I don't have anything like that. So yeah, we're going to get into energy. I'm not sure what the temperature here in Celsius would be. My head is too distracted to figure that one out right now. Somebody look it up. What would the temperature of 82 degrees be in Celsius? For now, I need to actually focus on the plugin making. Oh, PCPSU blew up. That sucks. Sorry to hear it. Yeah, I saw one guy. I have a burner Twitter account that has no posts on it that I just use to be able to see what other people say there. And I ran across somebody making a comment about, like, this is global warming, and that this is the bell curve of the coldest and hottest temperatures, and the entire thing slid in this direction. And I was like, I'm so tempted to sass on that guy on Twitter, even though I never post anything on Twitter anymore, because he was completely wrong. When you raise energy in the climate system, all of the extremes get more intense. You get colder colds as well as hotter hots. And yeah, but yep, we're definitely getting into warm days here in Vermont. And yeah, man, if you think that If 82 degrees is 28C and that's unbearable, you should see what it ends up doing. Like outdoors, it's probably over 90, maybe close to 100 now. I've got the room I've got my house sealed up as if it was the middle of winter. I'm running air ventilation from the basement up through the attic to kind of change the air and exhaust hot air from the top of the house. And I've been just revising everything and putting different kinds of fans in so that I can circulate air properly. And that's actually working pretty well, but it does mean that when I have video equipment pumping heat into the room, it's only going to kind of increase. And at the end of the day, when it gets dark again, then it can start cooling down and then it can start circulating air again. But for now, I'm stuck with a hot video studio and doing this. Unless I decided not to, I suppose. But I'm not deciding not to. I'm going to continue to do it. I will try to keep an eye on chat. It's been very distracting. Come to think of it, I'm going to also change chat to be live chat, just in general principles. I generally don't stick to... Don't mind me, I'm distracted. I'm staring at the video switcher again. I'm already thinking, like, what do I need to do in order to make this pump air through itself and cool itself so that it can function? Because that's clearly its problem. It's really hot. It's really, really hot. Hope I don't have to get a new one. It would suck if it got so hot that it like melted inside and broke. Anyways, here's what we're doing. We have Energy. This is the original Energy. It never, I don't think it got made into a, did it get made into a VST? I actually suspect it probably did. Let's go and have a quick look. I gotta keep half an eye on the screen to make sure that the video is not blowing up again. So we do have a Energy for VST. So this exists for both. Here's the thing. This is a perfect candidate for downsampling. This is a completely sample rate dependent algorithm, which I think is one of the reasons why nobody else does it. So we've got this same way of doing things throughout. We got a very consistent sort of behavior here. And it's this algorithm that has a weird effect that's hard to describe. I should be able to demonstrate it, though, by running the actual plugin. Because what we're going to work on is getting a version of it that's consistent over all sample rates. So let's show you Energy. And apparently I have an Energy2, but I don't think I have one. I'm going to make an Energy2 that replaces whatever the hell this is, because I don't know what that is. But I did not end up with an Energy2 for VSTs. So let's have a quick peek. What did it look like? That looks exactly the same as the other one. I think I never got any farther with that. I think that was just some kind of experiment that didn't lead to anything. But our original Energy is kind of like this. Oh, except for, that's not right. So if we play our audio, except for hang on, I got something to do. Sorry about the video quality. It's broken. You should be able to see the text anyhow, even though it's gone all dark now. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. we're going to make a little temporary file. And interestingly, the laptop is resampling this to 96K for its digital output, but don't have to worry about that. It'll be a little bit more of a load on it. So that's now 44.1K. So, oh, and the video came back. Nice. Maybe if I move this around. Weird. All right, that lives there now. In for dry wet. Hiss. Glitter. You can probably hear that. Rat. And let's do this a different way too. As the screen goes crazy, okay. Effect stacks. I want to show this with a meter. And I'm going to get my meter out of Oxenco span. Assuming, of course, that you can see it. Oh, there we go, came back. So we got that video there. This is a very high frequency, so high that it's not even showing up here. We can see that the glitter is around, I don't know, 12K or so. Although negative isn't that useful there. Rat is lower. Fizz is doing a weird thing. See where there's dips and notches in here? Scrape. Same deal. Chug. Again, as this algorithm expands outwards, we're getting like mid-rangey stuff going on. That's an upper mid bite. But there's also funny little dips and things going on. Snarl. And we can quit out of here, or at least we can when we make this visible again. And we can do something with some guitars and hear what that sounds like on guitars. In some kind of way, I guess. Man, this video thing is freaking out. It's really struggling, isn't it? I did not keep that effect. What the hell? Let's just listen to it. So, snarl. Yower. Chug. Now the point of that is Chug should be bringing out pick attack on distorted guitars, and we can kind of hear that. course, like glitter, brightness, rat, nasty, ratty sound, scrape. So don't you dare be sad. Let's get this party started, 'cause there's chaos to be. Actually, no, that's fizz. So, scrape. We've on for this for years. We're here to do your bit. So don't you dare be sad. Let's get this party started, 'cause there's chaos to be. And that was bringing out kind of vocal rip. Yeah, this is actually old music. So this is what Energy's doing. It's not really a controllable EQ, but it's doing weird stuff. I might even be able to show that with 44.1K, even mono, noise. Actually, that's too loud. It's probably too quiet, but it won't be too annoying to hear. We fire up our effect stack and do our little, let's add span so we can see the spectrum. We should be able to see what's going on here. So, hiss, glitter, rat. See what it's doing in the very top there too? Fizz. We can also kind of invert it a little bit, although only to a point. Apparently if you go all the way to -1, it doesn't work anymore. But we can choose between boosting and cutting this. Same with like glitter. We can notch it out that way. Scrape. See how it's got a funny little behavior? And then chug is here, but also here and here. And if we did chug and rat, we've got both of those going on, but that one, there's a little gap there. Which could be notched even harder. Snarl. And that energy is something you've got now. The thing is, it only wants to operate at 44.1K because all of that stuff is sample rate dependent. And we'll have a look at, let's see, here's our audio unit. We might not have time to dig into this completely because it's already noon, but we'll see how far we get before the heat shuts me and my entire system down. Here's how we've got it arranged. And this is what's inside Energy. It's kind of an older plugin. Using these things this way means that it's all individual variables for everything. You could do the same thing by making an array of variables and handling it differently. And this is just done in the crudest possible way. It's like, okay, if you have 2 of this, it's called duo. If you have 3 of it, you call it triplet. If you have 4 of it, you call it quad, and so on. It's very primitive, this. This is an old plugin. Because I'm not using VoxEncoSpan in my plugin videos anymore. I mean, I own it, but... So see how this is, it's based off of this? It's a set of sample variables, so we're basically keeping a little delay unit kind of thing going on. And this is just numbers. These are going from -1 to 1. So it's going -1 to 1, and we're actually inverting them all, and one interesting side effect here is that it has to be a power of 3, otherwise it will lose the polarity. If you have -1 times -1, it becomes 1. If you have -2 times -2, it becomes 4. If you multiply negative numbers by themselves an even number of times, they become positive. So we've got a power factor of 3 dealing with that. And that's also, turns out, going to negative values on that, it notched them to a certain point and then it stopped. So that's probably something I'm going to look after going in here further. This is my old school denormalizing. We don't do this anymore. And now we've got a variable called correction. And remember how this was like, I've got numbers called prev. Prev A, prev B, prev C, prev D. This is a primitive form of keeping track of what the old samples were. See, this is just a little delay buffer. All it's doing is, this is my current one, and this is the last one, and so on and so forth. It's keeping a little delay buffer. We're applying everything we do with this. So everything we do here, we're adding to a number called correction. And mix is the inverse dry-wet thing. I saw it and I didn't care for it, so we're not going to do it. At least not right now. So what's going on with all of this stuff is a very similar pattern. All of this is working more or less the same way. And it's the same pattern all the way up to, I might as well start porting all of this stuff over to a new Energy. Let's do that. I'm going to have to do that anyway, so let's do it. New plugin. We're going to go about this methodically because I need to be able to do it, even though this has been a very distracting day. Subtype of energy is Ener. So normally what I do with my subtypes is I take this bit that needs to be something like this, and then the very last letter that corresponds to the name of the plugin, I will increment it up for each new version. So Energy2 will become RS, so it becomes NS rather than NR, because like QRSTUV steps one forwards. And so we're going to call Energy2 NS. That also means that if there is a NS in the previous attempted Energy2 that I did, I'm not sure how long ago, I'll be replacing it. But I'll be doing that anyway, so I'm not concerned about that part. And let's do this before refactoring. That's probably going to need to be kept. I'm of two minds about this. I don't know whether to keep all of this as the big complicated pile of sliders, or set it up so that it is one slider for amount of effect and one slider for the frequency that it's at, and kind of move it up and down. Because the thing is, the way this works, the descriptive names are not bad. They are okay. But if you start fiddling with like this against that in order to try to make little dips and peaks in various places, it's going to become a pile of mess. And I think the most effective way of using this is to pick one and use that. Also, I would point out Definti and Jas. That person's using all of their optimizations is off. That's a bit of a problem. Normally, I think you would want to put optimizations on as long as they were not sacrificing accuracy. And to do that, I think would obliterate all changes. So, in theory, you can trust the compiler to figure some of this stuff out and do the right thing. Let's continue stepping through this while we are at it. We're going to, how many of those were there? 9. Boop. Making 10, not count anymore. And so if we're able to reproduce this, it'll act like this. Over to here. That's fine. A lot of these need to be changed to be the same as what I had before. I'm not certain that's what I need to keep. We're still not clear on whether or not we are keeping it exactly the same as before and just updating it for high sample rates, or whether we're going to make a new form of energy where you dial in where the peak goes. And then inf dry wet, how was that implemented? Let's go and see. Inf dry wet was also implemented as -1 to 1. So let us make that match. There we go. Reset is going to be a big pile of variables. Probably all in a row. That lives here. And yeah, sure enough, big long pile of variables. These don't actually need to be in order like this. And I'm leaving off FPN shape because that's part of the old noise shaping type stuff. Our new noise shaping type stuff uses the variable FPD. And down into process, we can't literally just grab this and copy the entire process because we're not using the old noise shaping. So what we're going to do is everywhere there's a control, like here, and this is the same as the Air plugin. And we're not using overall scale, but I'm not sure whether my other stuff uses that, so I'll leave that there for the moment. We don't have to have FP temp. We punch that in there, and then that should be working, and nothing's being done with overall scale at this time. I have to see whether the downsampling stuff uses that or not. If it doesn't, I'll remove it. And then rather than this, we have this. Where did I get the dry sample? Weird. How did I get the dry sample? How's this implemented? It's literally not implemented. Everything is being done on a raw input sample without changing it whatsoever, and so there is no dry. It says so in a comment. Yay, there's a comment, because we never touched input sample, so this provides the in dry wet control all by itself. Fair enough. I might leave dry sample still there, but yeah, that there is what this was. It got smaller because it's using FPD, and FPD is happening elsewhere. So, long double correction, which is where we start doing this audio stuff. This is very long text. Over to here, copy it, and that is the previous 32-bit dither, which you'll notice uses a rand call, which is much slower. So we got better. We did this better in future. And this is the current, which is doing its little FPD thing. And that's where we get the variable for the other thing, which I think also, these older plugins, there were some things that were not efficient about them. Like this is not actually a rand call, but it kind of might as well be. It's a much more randomized number in some ways. So if we boop that over there, this is now our dither to floating point. This was not actually a dither to floating point. This was an attempt to noise shape it, which didn't actually work. And we can close this and this, because in theory, apart from some little changes, we should be able to build this. If we do it the second time around anyway. Remember, this doesn't build the first time. It tries to build, and it really got stuck for a long time. Interesting. What happened to it? Let's see if it goes any faster this time. It made it that time. Unused variable, that's something I knew was happening. I'm feeling terrible, man. It's not only the heat, I'm also like coughing up stuff and not feeling great. Release Energy2. This will replace the previous Energy2. And now if I run something here, the new one that was being commented on before, and we're freaking out the screen, don't mind that. The video editor is overheating. Now if I load this, this is the new build. And we've got our different audio. It's interesting how the bass is on this fizz knob. Different things really jump out on these different numbers. So we've demonstrated that we have that working. So the main trick here, and it might be worth just whipping out a version that uses this technology. The main trick here, oh, this was my 96K, okay. Is including the undersampling. So on that note, let's go back to Xcode and open what is actually a recent project. We're going to see whether we can't open Chamber. That's actually the VST of Chamber, so no thank you. Let's open the AU of Chamber. Because Chamber includes the undersampling. You heard what that was doing. What I can do is run a 96K or 192K and show you that it's got the same frequency boosts. That would not be the case with the regular one. So over to here. Honestly, if I can do that, I'll call it a day well spent. And maybe we can go onwards to an Energy2 next week or something for having it be more adjustable. Or technically not more adjustable, more approachable is what I would call it. So chamber, that's what I was looking for. Here we go. And here is chamber. It's a big old reverb. But you know what else it does? It does this stuff, what you see on the screen right now. And this is my undersampling code. This is the code where if it's running at 96K or 192K or whatever, stuff that is tied to the existing sample rate. And if you just straight up scale it up, because the thing about it is, the way that worked, the sort of duo setting, various kinds of boosts, run at 44.1K, gave you this fairly clean, like near 20K boost. It was like a 17K and up, and it was fairly straightforward. But if you just used a higher sample rate and the lower slider to get something roughly equivalent, you'd wind up with additional notches and boosts and things. It wouldn't be the same. And of course, all of the names would no longer correlate with useful descriptions of what's happening. So the deal with this is we're going to go and dig up the code, and it's not going to be up here because it doesn't have anything to do with the controls. I get to leave that alone. If you see me staring off, that's because my OBS is showing a little picture of my face on the screen, and I've talked many, many times about how if you see your face moving around and talking, you look at the person, and that's not useful because I need to be looking at the camera instead. Anyways, last ref is how undersampling works. It's one of these things where I've got it in a little chunk. I just copy that and take it out, and whatever else is going on here, I get to completely ignore. This is from something else. This is the bit that is the undersampling code. It's all built into a little array, much like I've built the biquads to be in a little array. And so I go over to the Energy project and its H file. We see all of this stuff here. Tuck this in. And of course, I got to go back over to the CPP file because there's something I need to get out of that too. Namely, initialization of that stuff. Which, let's scroll way up. There's the unused variable. I'll just copy it out, block it out for the time being. And now we have an initialized variable, which is all going to start out as being 0. And now I got to put it into here, which happens almost immediately. Like, I could have correction be defined at every sample, but I don't even need to do that. The whole thing could be wrapped in undersampling. So it's like everything between this area, ninth. Oh, no, wait, it literally is called nint. Okay, never mind. We'll go back to that. This is the nint factor. You heard of fear factor? Well, nint factor is much worse. So chamber CPP. Next thing is I find out where we start going into this stuff. Now this particular thing is different because chamber filters stuff going into the downsampled part. So the high pass and the filter work using get sample rate and stuff, and they're not being run in an undersampled way. And there is a low pass on the end of everything which rolls off stuff after the whole downsampled part. And that also runs at full sample rate, whatever that might be, because it's better to run it that way. But Energy2, not the same. Energy2 is going to be putting like everything in. And here's where we start. Boop. If cycle equals cycle end, we're doing a reverb sample, or we're doing a undersampled part. So that goes right at the front here. In here somewhere. Boop. And then all this other stuff is happening between. And then back over to chamber. This is all the reverb code that's not being run literally every sample. So we hit this only when we need to. And it wasn't as big as the energy stuff was. And then once we're finished, here's the end of our undersampling code, except for we've also got a little detail here, which was just chamber. That's an averaging thing that I added to chamber, and it would work for other stuff as well, but it first showed up in chamber. I didn't want to add it to Verbity or Galactic because it would change maybe the sound a little bit, but I'm interested in trying out and seeing what this sounds like on a high frequency boost. So let's see, let's find out what it sounds like. We'll copy this over, and again, I told you there's a filter on the end of all of that, which is not part of the undersampling. And there's a wet dry here, which is not part of what energy is going to be. And if we go all the way to the end, we should be able to do this. And in doing this, we've got all this stuff going on. It isn't actually indented. I'm not sure if there's a good way of like view, cold folding, syntax coloring, text wrap lines. Modern compilers let you clean up the text better, but this might be in such an old compiler that it doesn't actually have ways of pretty printing things. Format, or maybe it does. Nope, that is just font. So it's very possible that there's no way to make it go like, okay, indent everything properly, please. There's stuff that does, but oh, I don't think this is a polyphase filter. I'm not even sure what that is. Let's quickly see whether this builds or whether I missed something. I missed something. Cycle and cycle end. So I'm guessing that showed up in chamber somewhere else that I missed. And I have an idea of where it would have been. So let's reopen the AU form of chamber and go and look for it. That would be here. A defined cycle. I'm reasonably sure that I did anyhow. Maybe I didn't. Let's go and find out. Energy has all this stuff going on. Energy has a thing called last ref. Yeah, I missed something. Here's the thing I missed. This is here, but there was a thing called cycle that mattered. And that really belongs up here. I'm not sure why it's not. Let's actually check that assumption. Firstly, we'll copy it. And this also means it's going to be a slight change in the coding, but it's not going to be like, it's syntactically different, but it's not going to change compilation at all. But that means that there will be a little GitHub update at some point, because my GitHub before was different. Back over to Energy. Back over to the H file. So that is part of the undersampling code. I should have put it right there, but I didn't. But I should have put it right there. And then, again, back into chamber CPP. Maybe that should live there. I think maybe I put it there because these other ones are also integers, but that makes no sense, so we're not going to do that. The things that are part of the undersampling code should live where the undersampling code lives. And then lastly, copy that. Do the same thing. And then go and get from here, I know it's cumbersome, this stuff. This is the bit I was missing. I forgot. Yes, let's save that. So reset is fine, and that's the bit that was missing. And it turns out I do need to have overall scale there after all. I got a feeling that if I go to 48K, it's not going to adapt perfectly, but 48K never worked perfectly with this anyhow, so I'm not going to worry about that. Or maybe I will, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Possible future bug fixes. So we've compiled, we've succeeded. Let's see what we've got now. We've got this same thing over again. And let's set up a little effect stack. I'll show you the difference between these two things, like what happened and why. And even use span to show pictures of it. So here we have Energy and Energy2. I can't tell whether the screen's going to go crazy or not. Eventually it won't. When it cools down, it won't. So we're at 44.1K. If we hit rat or fizz, turn it on, fizz does this. And fizz does this.
I saw something very strange. They were watching ponies on the New York Stock Exchange.
Now let's save the stack as Energy2. Now we're going to do something that might make this laptop unhappy and overheat too, but let's convert the sampling rate. Let's make it be a much higher sampling rate. Got to remember not to save this because I don't want to mess with what was already there. But this is now going to sound kind of similar. Let's just loop a little section. And go back to our Energy2. Now, energy it's now a higher frequency. And higher stuff than that, you can't even hear it. However, Energy2 we have the same edge on that bass that we had before. So what we see here is that if we have energy and we're working at a different sample rate, that's no longer working. That's addressing a sort of tight loop of samples that go around to the point where you change the sample rate and all of a sudden it's working at a much higher speed and it's hitting different frequencies. They no longer correspond to the labels and the behavior is just totally different. Whereas if we're using Energy2 and we hit something like, say, glitter, under normal circumstances, glitter is going to give you all kinds of boosted highs. Using the higher sample rate, it's now talking about like, what would it be? 36K or so. So you boost that and you can no longer hear it. But if we are on Energy2 with the undersampling glitter, we've got control over that range. Plus, I feel it's having a better tone than it had. So let's quit out of here without saving and fire up our high sample rate drums, the drums that are meant to be high sample rate, because they're recorded at 96K. And again, if we can use the effect stack, why not? So here's this little deal. I'll scooch these over so that they're side to side. I do, however, need to be able to reach these controls. Or do I? Maybe I don't. Let's just hit play. So here's our regular energy. And in order to get the high frequency boost, we got to go much lower. Like scrape or chug. All this stuff now only relates to much higher frequencies. We no longer have the ability to touch any of the mid-range frequencies with this. This is about as close as you'll get. You can see the sort of spikes there. So we're seeing some of that behavior, but it's just shifted upwards in pitch. Whereas if we do that, in the undersampled one, it's now showing up at the pitches they're supposed to be showing up. Like the boost is around 2K. It's just that we have this sequence of additional notches. And then the undersampling is actually giving us legitimate data, but it's kind of softened. It's probably also worth like with this, we're going to need to reformulate it. Because here's our regular dry wet. If we set it to this, everything's being fed through the downsampling, including dry. So if we supposedly go to dry, that's not really dry. This is dry. And this is the output of the undersampling. So it's doing that. That needs to get fixed. But I believe I can probably do that. In fact, I can even do that today. Let's quit out of here. Can you guess how I'm going to do it? Because I'm pretty sure I know how I'm going to do it. Here's our cycle equals cycle end. Correction needs to be defined elsewhere. Let us define correction up here where things are being instantiated. Or indeed make it a persistent variable like these. So we'll initialize that. We'll copy this. And then here's what we're going to do. We're putting that only there. We're going over here. Going up here. A little semicolon there so it works. Now what we've got is this is going to work the same way as it did before. Rather than just defining it where we need it, we're storing it. And it is going to be recalculated every time we define a new energy sample. So now we've got a correction that gets zeroed out here. And when we're not inside this, it stays at whatever it was the last time we went through that calculation process. In other words, this number is now sticking around. It's persistent. And it's changing every time we recalculate. Now what we did way down here is why we couldn't do the dry wet. Let's step well away from here. So what went wrong was input sample plus equals correction times mix. So maybe what we need to do is go back to having the dry sample. I think we just commented that out. Yeah. So we got our input sample. Now we've got dry sample, which is the input sample. So that's just assigning it. There's nothing lost when you assign one thing to the same type of variable again. Nyquist at 192K is 96K. This is in a completely different zone as far as talking about Nyquist. We're ignoring Nyquist. We're doing completely other things. Dry sample equals input sample. So we may have not actually needed to do that with correction after all. In fact, let's back it back out again. We're doing it a different way now. Nope. Nope. Not doing it that way. Meaning that we are, in fact, defining this here. But now, here's where this goes. Now our input sample is what this was, and that is what's being interpolated. And we do need a dry sample, which we do have one. But we're smoothing the input sample with this. Or we're interpolating it here, and then we're smoothing it here, and we've not actually applied it yet, so addition is commutative. So now, rather than going input sample plus equals correction times mix, and it's been untouched, so it's almost the same thing as dry sample equaled input sample all the way in the beginning. So if we take this out, we've got our dry sample being the same as this. So now if we take this and just make it be correction times mix, it's doing the same thing as dry sample input sample equals dry sample plus correction times mix. Because what we were doing a plus equals. We were doing like this is the same as dry sample, but we're adding this stuff and then just immediately using it on the output. Which was somewhat, I tend to do things in a more consistent way these days. So that was a slightly unusual way of doing it. Now we're doing it like this. We're simply replacing input sample. And we could ignore all of this correction stuff as well, but we're adding up stuff in correction as it goes. And kind of going from there. So this will work. We could not have correction there at all and just be like input sample equals inputs. Well, we could zero out input sample for, well, no, we couldn't because this is all referring to it. So it has to be here all this time. And let's just walk through this stuff and make it work. Input sample is now our correction amount. Times mix is how we invert it. We interpolate it and smooth it because that's what's coming out of our energy algorithm. And then rather than dry sample plus equals input sample and then input sample is the output, we're going input sample is the changes and then we add dry sample to it. Meaning that if our wet dry stuff was right down to 0, which was done here, this is the wet dry stuff. Mix is what's doing that. We just add dry sample to it. So if we had completely dry, none of the effect, that's just a 0 having the original sound added to it in long double, by the way, so it's very high resolution. And this should work. We may be getting to the point where this is actually ready to give people if they were in love with the previous energy. Because the thing about energy is that it has all those little sliders with all those little descriptors. And they're pretty good descriptors. If I was to just make it a sweep control, that would be somewhat inaccurate because it's not really a bandpass sweep. It's weirder than that, as you saw. So here's our AU. We're going to need to remove that last slider too, but that's fine. Here's a 96K audio. Effect stacks. And here is our ability to boost stuff using the original energy. As you can see, it's not doing anything weird other than it's already a weird sound. And it's all very high frequency, but without the funny notch. And now we have the new Energy2. And we can do something like boost glitter, which is giving us a weird effect. It's boosting a lot here, but then it does have a little overlap. But if we go back to dry, it's back to normal again. So there you have it, an Energy2 that is capable. I'm trying to figure out whether I can make the screen behave differently by moving this around. Oh, I made the screen die. Oh, I came back. Hello. Hello, hello. So here's our downsampled Energy2. We've got our hiss boost. You can hear how that's very close to 20K. We can even duck with it a little bit. Although I got a feeling I might want to fool with the maximum intensity of the INV setting, because I remember this doing something that wasn't right. So hiss, we can more or less hear just the extreme highs that's bringing out. That's like a silk band boost kind of thing. Glitter. That's definitely around 15K or so, but remember it's not only 15K, it's a set of boosts. Rat. Kind of gnarly, or we can duck it and boost glitter and boost hiss lots. Major highs boost. Here's fizz. You can see the really interesting set of peaks and dips on the end of it here that you can combine in interesting ways. Scrape. Big boost here and here and here. Chug, which ought to be relevant for guitars and things. And here's an interesting point. One thing we can do, since this is undersampled but we're using the real dry, is I would suggest doing this. boost the chug, and then if you need to dial it back using the real dry wet. That is actually something that I would endorse. I have no idea what Better Maker EQ is. See, we can boost this all the way. Or there's our yower, snarl. Say we were trying to make a nice silky hi-hat sound. So we start boosting stuff, like all the hiss, all the glitter, maybe not as much of the glitter. A little fizz for kind of metallic sound. Let's see what we like as far as rad is concerned. Yeah, maybe the full cancel is not bad. We'll leave that. That has its effects. And some of these other ones, maybe we can... I'm hearing almost a phase shiftery thing on the hats here. Let's see if we hear the same thing in some of these other sliders. I think maybe it's better on this one. And so now we have a huge high frequency boost coming from Energy. But since we're using the real dry rather than a undersampled dry, here's our real sound, and as we sneak in this weird algorithm, we can bring in as much of this as we want. Here, it's gonna scroll through again. So this is, I think, a useful way of handling this, is doing it so that we have this weird effect with a non-undersampled dry wet. And then if this is our hat and simple boosts that we've got going on here, it's a very serious top end boost. You can see it on the measurement. It's like, that's compared to, this is what it normally is. All the hi-hat. So then we pull back in dry wet. I'm not sure whether it feels like it's exactly the same. It should. That is like minus 0.03 though. No, it feels about the same. And then rather than just going to the full boost, we can bring in small amounts of this complicated conglomeration of stuff. For just whatever the color is that we create using Energy, you can then apply small amounts of it. Just whatever the relevant sound picture needs to be. And it'll work on things like guitars and stuff too. Let's test that out. It's almost time to stop streaming, so let's test that out. Again, here's what the cymbals are doing. Here's our maximum boost. It is a downsampled, a undersampled boost. So it's got its own weird little quality. But we can blend it with the legitimate 96K stuff, so there's actual 96K content. The dry part of the content was not actually undersampled. And this means that this method of going about doing this, here, let's do a more exaggerated one. Pure glitter. How about all the boosts? Glitter and rat. So that's really bright. Oh, and take this out too. So very bright here. But we can bring in just a little tiny bit of it. Just enough to stand up in the mix, but the underlying sound is not only full sample rate, but also hasn't been through the filter at all. We get to bring in just only the details that are being enhanced, because it's a weird kind of enhancy boy. You basically construct your own bizarre high frequency edge using this and then apply as much of it as you would want. So let's go back to that heavy rock thing and make it be something more intense. I wonder if this laptop can handle 192K. Shall we find out? It's the last thing. Let's find out. It's only 2 channels. And that'll be a nice little torture test for the plugin. Let's just play it. Not ask it to do span and everything all at the same time. So here we are. Fizz. Oh wait, we have to turn it on first. Back to that bass. And with that, we've got the bass with that little edge. Specifically, the fizz control was interacting with the bass in an interesting way. Hang on, there we go. Hopefully the screen will behave itself for a second. So if we turn this up, and that's a really sparky bass now, but we can go back to dry and just introduce a little bit of it. So only the effect is, only the boost is at full crank, and then the effect is being applied with dry. And we can do the same kind of thing with the heavy guitars. We'll dial that back for a second. So remember how chug is like this? Oh wait, turn on to dry wet.
I saw something very strange. They were washing ponies on your New York Stock Exchange. They all joined there.
So doing that, the chug has turned into just all loud noise and kind of the crunching of the guitar pick. And it is still accurately doing it even though we're at 192K. So we can bring in a little bit of it using the in for dry wet. No chug.
I saw something very strange. They were washing ponies on your New York Stock Exchange.
And yeah, so that worked. And then if I'm not mistaken, let's just grab a little.
It's going well.
How about the "and they sang" in the vocals, and we'll play with Yower on that, or possibly Scrape.
It's going well, God. They sang this green like
Horror from Japan, and they sang. So there we go. What it sounds like with
this green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God.
that was very mid-rangey.
This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God.
We dial it right back again.
This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God.
And we can get a little of that energy.
Green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well.
Whereas if we were going for Scrape, again, we're looking at things in the vocals here because that's a belted rock vocal. It is me. Yay. But
This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God. This green like horror.
and that's real gritty sounding.
And they sang this going well.
So if we want to heighten that up a little bit,
This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God.
and that really stands out.
This green like horror.
Let's do both.
And they sang this going well, God. This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going.
Man, so we made the vocals jump right out of the mix by boosting those things, because Scrape and Yower both related to what those voices were doing. They were sitting in those narrow frequency ranges and the various pluses and cancellations. Let's play a little more. Let's see whether we can take the rattiness out of it by taking rat and subtracting it. This is going to be loud for a second, guys.
This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God. This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God. This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God. This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God. This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this.
Yeah, and doing that with the rat control, which is around 10K or so, some really nasty highs up there. I dialed that back a little bit and left the intense mid-range boosts and got a setup where I could put just a little bit of the effect in, and the vocals kind of jumped out, but without as much of the nasty, gritty highs that there were. Let's do a little bit more by doing inverted. Do the vocals duck back into the mix if we do the opposite?
Green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God. This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God.
I wouldn't say that actually ducked out of the mix.
This green like horror from Japan. And they sang this going well, God.
Although it did take out those particular mid-range rip frequencies that vocal relied on. Yeah, I think we have a result. I feel comfortable letting people have this, and I'll tell you why. The fact that I could revise it so that it was more of a slider for dialing in different frequencies and then boosting or cutting them, that's valid, but that's not really how these algorithms work. And the thing about it is having all these little labels on things, like I want more fizz in my hi-hats but less scrape, and so you do those things and it'll kind of do what you expect. And that's because these aren't just frequency bands, so behaving as if I can approximate it down to one isn't really relevant. Although I was thinking about trying to make it so that you dial in a frequency band and it would do whatever combination of these settings would boost that frequency band the most, while interacting with the other ones And the higher frequencies that become a comb filtery-like effect would kind of dial back a little bit. But honestly, half the fun of Energy is having all the little names. And they're names that'll fit in a VST plugin as well, so that's cool. And the upgrade of doing it so it'll work on something like 192K or 96K, which I do very much endorse, but then having the full wet be the undersampled part, meaning it has the funny comb filtering and funny behavior, and then dry being non-undersampled, and blending those two things together is just working super well. This is bringing what Energy had going on into higher sample rate situations better than I could have possibly imagined it would going in. So I am pleased with this day's work. Do not save the change to 192K. Yikes. And we're going to call that a successful day of plugin coding, because Energy2 is good to go. I can remove the final slider that doesn't belong there at my own convenience, and I'll be porting it to VST. And yeah, I think this will work great for next Sunday. And I hope you like it. I feel as if this brings Energy into the modern Airwindows mixing world way more than I would have expected. Because I was still thinking in terms of, like, if I wasn't using the sliders and generic interfaces, this could almost be the kind of thing where it's like, okay, push buttons to engage these descriptions and not even balance them with sliders. Although people would want to balance them anyway, so never mind. But Energy well, I barely get how the EQ actually works either. The EQ works by essentially having a string of samples and hyping out different ones in combinations of other samples. Like the code is right there, but that doesn't mean that it's easy to understand what's going on. It's essentially a concept that started out as a high frequency boost called Air, which also exists. And maybe that would be also good to put a undersampling thing on. But Air exists as a algorithm that relates only to sample rate. And it's like a two sample algorithm that can only boost the extreme highs near the Nyquist frequency. And then there's evolutions of it using 3 samples, 4 samples, 5 samples, and so on. And when I tried them, it turned out, and that's, dude, what is with the Pultec? What is with all a Pultec is a inductor and a capacitor. That is a Pultec is a simplest possible non-phase coherent low slope EQ. It's not a steep band. A Pultec is a slow band. It is a slow low pass or high pass or whatever. It's like a 6 dB or 12 dB. And that's, put it this way, I just put out a plugin with 3 Pultecs built into it, because I'm using those IIR filters, which are the simplest form of one pole filter that you can have. And what a Pultec is the simplest form of analog filter that you can have. There could be interactions with the core of the transformers and inductors and stuff, and that's worth looking into. And if I manage to make an interesting filter that used that as part of the code and got it, or, God forbid, if I saved up my money and bought a Pultec and studied it real hard, then we could talk about that. But the filters that I'm choosing to put in things like chamber and whatever are already pretty darn close to what you would be asking for. I'm not going to just stick a name on stuff to make it seem cooler. Like, energy is energy. It's not any other kind of filter. So yeah. There is no graphic Pultec. Now you're just talking silly. Now I'm just going to run away and become offended. No, there's no graphic Pultec. That is not a thing. A Pultec is barely a parametric. A Pultec is usually switched inductors and capacitors. And when you talk about Pultec, what you mean is sometimes it doesn't even have makeup gain, all right? It could be completely passive. A Pultec could be a EQ where you have to run hot into it because it loses so much that you have to run it into a preamp or something. And Pultecs are completely awesome in mastering. That is a topology for EQs that have always been good for mastering. But as far as digital filters, I'm already doing that. I've already got lots of stuff out there. Check out Baxandall. Baxandall is a very good behavior. Yeah, be careful to not get hung up on brand names of things. You got to understand how the stuff actually works. And that gets complicated when it's something like energy. Energy works in such a weird way that there's a challenge as far as even describing how it's doing what it's doing. But effectively what it's doing is you get a big peak at whatever frequency it's singling out. That frequency is super sample rate dependent, and you don't get to just redefine it. It's an interaction with the sampling rate, effectively. And then when you have lower frequencies and the very highest ones, you also start getting increasing bands. It's a series of boosts rather than just a boost. And the way that works, since it's a very, very, very simple algorithm, it's a much more interesting way of doing like a gnarly, aggressive sounding mid-range boost than you could ever do if you just tried to mimic the same weird peaky dippy EQ curve with some kind of really complicated biquad filter arrangement or something like that. You wouldn't. Energy is going to beat the crap out of most things that are like biquad based or whatever, which are trying to do a energy or frequency or high frequency, mid-range, whatever boost. And that's why I'm pleased about it, being able to bring something into what I would consider the modern age of high sample rate stuff, which I'm going to be trying to encourage as it becomes possible for people, because it's not always possible for people. But then, like, I was running Energy on an antique MacBook Pro running Snow Leopard, Mac OS 10.6.8, on a 192K track. It was only 2 channels, but it was doing that live. It was running a sample rate higher than my Lavery converter can do. I could also have been doing it at 96K, in which case it would be outputting exactly what the converter is looking at. And like the antique laptop was fine. It was able to handle it. So I'm very skeptical whenever people go on about like, well, you can't have high sample rates because we need to have 6,000 tracks all at once. I'm like, no. You don't understand how we used to record things. If you want to do modern stuff where everything has to have 6,000 tracks, and for that reason you wind up having to do everything at 41K, 24 bits if that, 32-bit sample bus, and so on and so forth, then continue to do that. But when you have the actual tones on point that much, it takes the place of needing to have that many tracks. You should be able to build something amazing out of just like 6, 12 or so tracks, if you're doing it right. Having all those tracks is getting away from needing to have the individual channels sound that good. If the individual channels sound that amazing, you don't need to layer 50,000 of them. And that's just my opinion. Like, that's just your opinion, man. So that's just my opinion. But that's how I'm developing my stuff. And I have just thrown, well, this coming Sunday, I will have just thrown a massive tool for working in that realm of higher sample rate and just making your individual tracks be freakishly amazing and compelling and attention-getting, so you don't need to layer 6 billion tracks on top of each other. And that's the idea. I know that it's not mainstream. I don't care. That's the idea. With a bit of luck, as we continue to move forwards and I keep pushing these things through, I can even get into some of the stuff like having a new piece of music for people to hear when I demonstrate plugins, because I never end up doing any new music because I don't have time. But I'm working on stuff. Here's the thing that I'm working on most recently. Hang on. I'm fooling around with these little cards, which are like my arrangement cards. Eventually I'll print them out and let people buy them if I get this mastered and it turns out to actually work. And the idea is you have these and you work them in such a way where you're constructing these little combinations of things where, like, this card goes to this card because this card has a red piece here. It's marked cruel and angry, so we're describing the kinds of arrangements by descriptive terms. And it sort of tucks in here, so if you were playing this card, then the direction that your music would go would be taking a 45-degree angle and going this way. And then you have some other choices where you could continue to go downwards if you switched back to a rich and full tone, which would look like this. Or you could pick something that would go back, the other direction again. And there should be ways of having the directions and shapes that you make composing arrangement this way do useful things as far as composing something that has interesting qualities. And here's what I'm adding. I've had these and I've been developing them for some time. But what I've started to add is that these now have time signatures written on them. And my idea is like my cruel and angry section. If you chose to go to this red color, which would mean that you're switching into a really intense part of the arrangement, those are more likely to have weird time signatures associated with them. In this case, it says 1716, so you'll be counting a 17, and it'll be like da 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 da. And if you do that and make a whole arrangement out of this kind of stuff, they all have different, like there's a 7/8, there's a 4/4, there's a lot of 4/4s. They're associated with like more chilled out arrangement colors. If you make a whole arrangement out of something where you've got, brown into red, into yellow, into whatever, and you're making an arrangement and deciding what you're going to do with it, you make this little snake of cards that's the arrangement that you're going to use. And it says like, okay, and it's loud here, and then it's chilled out here, and then this part is a calm period, which suddenly snaps into something more aggressive or evolves into something not very different from the calm period. And as you keep doing that and you use more and more cards, you're making a longer and longer snake. And my idea with turning it into a sort of a game is you do that, and then, like Adam Neely likes to say, repetition legitimizes, repetition legitimizes, repetition legitimizes. You should get a higher score for the cards if you have multiple sections that match, like multiple sections of red. So you're switching into this, or like orange is your chorus. So your chorus is like, is this particular color, and it's showing up in multiple places on this. We're going back to it repeatedly. You'll have different oranges from your random card draws and stuff. This one is the colors I have for orange is happy, angry, like your loud, rowdy, rocky kind of stuff. And this says 6/8. If you have multiple instances of orange and you're making a song out of the result, what you can do is play the game until you have a set of cards that goes through a shape and does what you want. and then pick one of the time signatures that is shown on your entire like card thing and use that for all of the sections. You don't have to do the time signature for each one as shown. The more you repeat something, the wider a range of choices you get to have as far as making up your arrangement. And repeatedly returning to whatever musical theme it is that you've got, you'll be able to go like, okay, here's my red bit. This is rowdy and it says cruel and angry. It's a super heavy, like metal prog, or just challenging and demanding kind of stuff. Whatever you associate with red, whatever you associate with this is fire. And you have like 4 different instances of it through the course of whatever it is that you drew out. So you have 4 different choices of time signature, but they might, who knows which choices you will have available. It is a restraining factor. But the more you want to repeat something, in theory, the more options you'll have for constructing a piece of music that actually works and makes sense, rather than being like, oh, this is the musical stunt that I'm doing, so it goes to a rowdy, alarming thing, but one of it is in 23/8 and one of them is in 17/16 and one of them is a 5. Those don't match. So if you play this game idea properly, and if I can make it into a game idea and it really kicks butt, I will have these cards printed up and you'll be able to buy them. I totally will do that. I may also Creative Commons them or something like that. I haven't entirely decided, because it's like, well, I could do something like that. And especially if I have to personally manage mailing them out and stuff, that becomes work. So I'd probably want to just be like, no, this is my thing, buy these. But if it works, it could be pretty cool. And remember, this doesn't cost money. I made this available for free. So if you were doing the thing of like, I want to make a composition, and say you're doing ambient music, so you're using like red or green or blue or whatever, and you're trying to compose something where it's like mostly blues and greens, and you have this little burst in here that is red, but you're in ambient music. So what that means in your context is you're like ostinatos suddenly throw in a 17 and you have some kind of aggressive sound, but it's still ambient. It doesn't have to be restricted to any one genre. And then as long as you're doing that, use the free slide rule and you can look up chords and things that are in line with what key you're in, or what would constitute departing from a key in a particular direction and going to like, I want to throw in an A flat minor just to be weird. Okay, you do that, and these are the chords that correspond to the key that you're in now. And this is free. This I'm just giving you. Look on my website for the downloadable thing, print it out, cut it out, and make your own. And there's also a fellow who made an online version. So on that note, we're kicking butt, taking names, or kicking butt and drawing things on cards, or moving sliders as we do. And on that note, I will get you folks Energy2 this coming Sunday. Seems very doable. I don't think that's going to be a big problem. Wish me luck as I survive through the incredible heat wave, the moderate heat wave that we're getting up here in Vermont. It's really not that incredible. It's not that major. When we do hit incredible heat waves, I'm going to be like dripping with sweat. And I'll be like, ah. But for the time being, talk to you folks later. Bye-bye.